Jai Gurudev. We welcome you for today's event and we welcome the press. Press నుంచి వచ్చిన వాళ్ళకందరికీ స్వాగతం. ప్రపంచ శాంతి కోసం 139 దేశాల నుంచి 11,000 మంది ఇక్కడ కలిశారు. ఇంతమంది ధ్యానం చేసే వాళ్ళు కలిసేది ఇదే మొదటిసారి. ఇక్కడ వచ్చిన వాళ్ళు వివిధ మతాలు, భాషలు, కులాలు అనుసరించి వచ్చారు. ప్రపంచ శాంతి స్థాపించడానికి ఇది ఒక మంచి పద్ధతి. ఈ మెడిటేషన్ భావాతీత ధ్యానం, టీఎం మెడిటేషన్, ట్రాన్సెండెంటల్ మెడిటేషన్, టీఎం సిద్ధి ప్రోగ్రామ్ ఈ సైంటిఫిక్గా నిరూపించి వరల్డ్స్ బెస్ట్ సైంటిస్ట్ ద్వారా అనేక పరిశోధనలు జరిగాయి. 1958 నుంచి 2008 వరకు పరమ పూజ్య మహర్షి మహేష్ యోగి గారు ఈ ధ్యానాన్ని, భావాతీత ధ్యానాన్ని ప్రపంచవ్యాప్తిగా 200 దేశాలు నేర్పారు. ఈ ధ్యానం వేదిక పరంపర నుంచి వచ్చిన ధ్యానం. నేడు మనం ఈ ప్రోగ్రాంలో ప్రెస్ వాళ్ళు వచ్చినారు. ఈ ప్రోగ్రాంలో మన అందరికీ ఒక కిట్ ఇచ్చారు ప్రెస్ వాళ్ళకి. మీరు చూసుంటారు, ఇన్ కేస్ మీకు దొరకకపోతే చెప్పండి. దీంట్లో గ్లోబల్ యూనియన్ ఫర్ సైంటిస్ట్ ఫర్ పీస్, సైంటిస్ట్ సొల్యూషన్ టు వైలెన్స్ అండ్ గ్లోబల్ కాన్ఫ్లిక్ట్. దీంట్లో డాక్టర్ టోనీ నాదర్ గారు ఓపెన్ లెటర్ పంపించారు ప్రెసిడెంట్ జో బైడెన్ గారికి. ఈ ప్రెస్ రిలీజ్లో ఎలా గ్రూప్ మెడిటేషన్ చేసే ద్వారా వరల్డ్ పీస్ ఎస్టాబ్లిష్ చేయవచ్చు, స్థాపన చేయవచ్చు అని చాలా బాగా ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేసి ఒక లెటర్ పంపించారు. ఇక్కడ ఈ సైంటిఫిక్ ఎవిడెన్స్ అంతా మెన్షన్ చేశాము, మీరు నిదానంగా చూడవచ్చు. దీంతో పాటు మీకు ఒక యూఎస్బి డ్రైవ్ కూడా అటాచ్ చేశాము, దాంట్లో అన్ని డీటెయిల్స్ ఉన్నాయి. దీంట్లో ఎలా కాన్ఫ్లిక్ట్ రెడ్యూస్ చేయవచ్చు దాని గురించి చాలా బాగా ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేశారు. ఈ అసెంబ్లీలో 139 కంట్రీ నుంచి 11,000 మంది వచ్చారు. దాని డీటెయిల్స్ అంతా ఈ షీట్లో మెన్షన్ చేశాము. ఈ ట్రాన్సెండెంటల్ మెడిటేషన్, భావాతీత ధ్యానాన్ని అడ్వాంటేజెస్ ఏంటి దాని గురించి ఈ డాక్యుమెంట్లో చాలా బాగా మెన్షన్ చేశారు. ఇంకా మన మెయిన్ స్పీకర్స్ డాక్టర్ టోనీ నేదర్ గారి గురించి దీంట్లో మంచి బయోగ్రఫీ, దాంతోపాటు బాకీ సైంటిస్ట్ గురించి బాగా ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేశారు. సో ఇప్పుడు మీరు చూడపోవాల్సింది ఒక ఈజీ ప్రజెంటేషన్, బ్రెయిన్ మ్యాపింగ్ చేయబోతున్నారు. ఇది ఫస్ట్ టైం చేస్తున్నారు, సో ఇది ఒక చాలా మంచి అడ్వాంటేజ్ అందరికీ చూసి నేర్చుకునేదానికి. ఇప్పుడు స్టేజ్లో మాతో పాటు రామ్ శ్రీవస్తవ్ గారు, రినీ శ్రీవస్తవ్ గారు ఉన్నారు. మీకు ఏదైనా క్వశ్చన్స్ ఉంటే మీరు తెలుగులో అడగొచ్చు, హిందీలో అడగొచ్చు, ఇంగ్లీష్లో అడగొచ్చు, మేము సైంటిస్ట్ గారిని అడగొచ్చు. మేము will be more than happy to answer all the questions. Thank you very much, and on to Mr. Ram Srivastav ji.
Thank you, Prashant. So as Prashant just said, over 11,000 experts in consciousness technologies for peace from 139 countries have been here at Kana Shanti One for the last 2 weeks, practicing together Transcendental Meditation and the TM Siddhi program. These technologies were derived from India's ancient Vedic science by Maharshi Mahesh Yogi. They are now practiced by millions of people worldwide. They are India's gift to the world. With these technologies, we can at last create peace in the world family of nations. The speakers at today's press conference are scientists. They understand how these technologies work and what is the research that proves that they work. They will explain how, for less than cost of 1 day of war, world peace can be established and perpetuated. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Tony Nader. Dr. Nader is chairman of the Global Union of Scientists for Peace, which is a worldwide organization of leading scientists and world leaders dedicated to the cause of peace. Dr. Nader is a medical doctor trained at Harvard University and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And he has a doctorate from MIT in brain and cognitive science. He is a globally recognized expert in the science of consciousness and human development, and is the successor to Maharshi Mahesh Yogi as the head of Transcendental Meditation organizations in more than 140 countries. Dr. Nader's empirical research in neurochemistry and neuroendocrinology has been widely published in many peer-reviewed scholarly journals. He has presented the central importance of consciousness and its development for all areas of life at many academic and governmental institutions worldwide, such as Stanford University, the Harvard Business School, and the House of Commons in the UK. With this podcast and his books, including the forthcoming Consciousness is All There Is, How Understanding and Experiencing Consciousness Will Transform Your Life, and frequent online discussions with leading thinkers, Dr. Nader is expanding our understanding of the relationship between consciousness and physiology and the possibility of developing full human potential. Please welcome Dr. Tony Nader.
Jai Gurudev, thank you so much for the press. Thank you, Sri Ramji and Prashantji, for hosting us. It's a great joy for us to be with the press of this great state of Bharat, of India, and to present to you what we are doing in your state, and hopefully all the people of India and the world will be able, through your reporting, to see what has been happening in this great, grand state. What we are doing is 10,000 people from 139 countries assembled to experience pure consciousness, the source of all that there is. And in that experience, they enliven a field which is non-local, which is like electromagnetic field or gravitational field, is spread all over the universe. And that most important field, and we will hear from Dr. Hagelin as from the physics perspective, is like a unified field of the laws of nature. So it's like diving from the surface of the ocean and going to the depths of the ocean and being able to manage all that is happening on the surface from the deepest level. The text that you have and the press release explain a lot of that, and we are happy to answer your questions. There are two important things. One is, does it work? And that is why we are having this demonstration, to show that it actually works on the individual level as well as on the collective levels. And that's why we have the scientists with us who will beautifully present to you some of the research that is being done on the individual level. And there are scientists that are there in different parts of the world that are looking at statistics of different kind to see whether there is change during that time, or at least stabilization of the situation. And they will look at before, during, and after, and compare very accurately the statistics of different social indicators to see how it has affected the collective awareness, not only of those who are here, but also of the whole world. So that is one demonstration, but this demonstration is based on a long history, and I'd like to review with you briefly the history of this, what we call Maharishi effect. And if we want to come back into history, it really goes back to the ancient times when the rulers had a group of people around them, and as large as they can get, who practiced these deep meditations to enliven the field of consciousness. At that time, for lack of a better word, they called it a prayer or an assembly of yagya, which means an action that supports natural law. And this has been in the ancient times, but in our modern time, already in 1944, at the beginning of 1944, so for us it's just about 80 years exactly, 80 years from now, there were the Second World War. And during that Second World War, from our tradition, Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, who was the Jagat Guru of Jyotirmat, assembled a large group of people to practice such technologies. Of course, for the West, they called it prayers, but in fact, it is just transcending, going back to the self and going to the source of all creativity and intelligence. We are very lucky that one of our great doctors, Dr. Rector, who is one of our champions in our Maharishi International University, had collected a magazine which says March 13, 1944. And actually, at that time, it cost 10 cents. So you have. And in this magazine, there is, in the United States, it's a Life magazine. At that time was one of the primary magazines. There is this picture, which we'll share with the press, of $80 years ago, an assembly, and it was really to create the possibility for the Second World War to be softened and to end. From our perspective, this was the major impulse of making a difference in world consciousness that took a few weeks or so, but then it ended up in the proper results of ending the war. In 40 years after that, Maharishi did what he called the Taste of Utopia course in the middle of the United States. That was exactly 40 years ago from today. And he did that based on research that has been collected, that has shown the powerful effect of how individuals meditating create an effect in society. Maharishi came to the West in the late 50s, 60s. He was envisaging that, but he came that and started to teach transcendental meditation gradually. And by the early 70s, many people had learned transcendental meditation. And Maharishi wanted to see what happened in those places where many people are practicing transcendental meditation. So they looked at different cities, and the scientists found that when 1% of the population of a city or a town practiced transcendental meditation, that was amazing, because as compared to nearby cities and nearby towns, there was a reduction in conflict, a reduction in crime, and a reduction in problems in those cities. So Maharishi had predicted that, and that's why it was called the Maharishi effect, which is also called the 1% effect, which means when a small percentage of people practice this program together, it has an effect on the whole society. And scientists explain this in different ways. For example, when you want to create a coherent effect to light, like if you light a lamp and the lamp has its photons going in all directions, that's a regular light. That same wavelengths of light, if it is coherent, it means if the waves are going together, it becomes a laser beam, a very powerful laser beam that can actually ultimately, if it's enough concentrated with enough power, it can even open tunnels in the mountains, it can go to the moon, to Mars, you can send the message because it's coherent and it flies very far. What is interesting is that to create a laser light, you need only a small percentage of the lights, about 1%, to become coherent, which means vacillate together, and all the other photons of light come along and get entrained, that get taken into that laser light and creates it. This is one example, and there are many examples of how individual entities' coherence can create a powerful effect on a global level and take all the other aspects into it and create that effect. So that is basically from physics perspective. But basically, this is really what we are doing. What is the mechanics of this? How does it work? And that why is it not only 1%? It's because Maharishi developed a more advanced technique, the techniques of the Siddhi program from the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, where people, when they go deep into themselves and they use specific techniques and specific sutras, they can even lift up in the ground. That's why we call it yogic flying. And when this happens, there is an upsurge of coherence that actually goes like ripples in the field and is beyond the localized effect in time and space. And this has also been demonstrated in 54 scientific studies that were done repeatedly with statistics, and many of them published in peer-reviewed journals that show this actually works. So it works, the system works. How does it work? Is again from the field, and the field is a field of consciousness. So the underlying field of life is a field of consciousness. In physics, it's described as a unified field of natural law. We will hear more about that. What is also interesting, and we will hear from the scientists, is the new understanding about what we call collective neuroscience, where the effect in one brain influences other brains, and they get more coherent together, and their effect spreads out. So the techniques works, it has been demonstrated, it has a real effect, and we know also the mechanics by which it works. And that's what we are sharing with you today, some of the science, how it works, and the effects it produces. Now the question will be, what are the effects of our assembly, which hasn't completed but is about to complete. And these effects are studied scientifically, and we will hear from the scientists, on the individual level, while other scientists in different parts of the world are collecting data to see the effect on the world and on society. Now briefly, and it's not scientific, but from my own observation and perspective, there are many important things that have actually happened, even during these 2 weeks, because that will be mainly your question, like, did we succeed or not on the social level? Well, when we entered, or we were entering 2024, the year 2024, if you read the news, it was most alarming, because it was all about warmongering, about fighting, and it will not stop. The promise is that it will escalate, things are going to be horrible, and all the predictions on all the fronts were on the most negative side. So the challenge that was put to us was quite high, unfortunately, by the end of the year. So the way I see it is, there are like two energies. There is the energy of fighting, the energy of war, and there is the energy of peace, and the things that seem to indicate that things are going into a peaceful direction. Independently of what people say or think or do on the surface level, you have to see what is actually happening on those levels. And one very important aspect, for example, which is also in all of our awareness, is in the Middle East and the problems that's happening in Israel, Palestine, and all of that in the Gaza area. And there, again, the war was at its maximum, and the idea that it's going to continue and last for 2 2024 the whole year, and it will not stop, and these were the predictions. And suddenly, as the course started to settle down, because when we came at the beginning, of course, 10,000 people coming together and having to be organized and make sure they do their program at the same time, take care of their needs and all of that, it took a few days to settle down. And as it settled down, one of the great news came that the Israeli army is withdrawing its fighters from the field, and it's calling the reservists back to their regular daily life so they can go back to their daily operations and their daily activities and rejoins their families. For me, that was a very powerful indicator. At the same time, the United States had stationed its most powerful aircraft carrier, the Gerald Ford, which is actually, it seems, the biggest and most powerful in the world, a huge engine of defense and war, if you like. And it had stationed it near the shores of the Eastern Middle East. And when all this news about terrible things are happening and will happen and we're going to fight and all of that, suddenly the General Ford is called back to the United States to go back home. What this means is the feeling, the energy of war is felt that it's not as urgent anymore, because why would a battleship that is there to maintain balance or to protect or to fight, whatever is needed, suddenly feels the need and the possibility to go back to its home. So going back home has been the process that's going on. And if you look carefully, you see that the energy of war is deflating, and the power of pushing towards peace, towards different diplomatic solutions, is much more and more being talked about and much more and more being discussed. On the Ukraine and Russia front, one thing happened that is also unusual, very unexpected. I'm not saying the whole thing has been resolved and we're living on heaven on earth. It takes a little more to do that, and it will be too magical to be even credible. It requires time to settle. But there was the highest number of exchange of prisoners ever since the beginning of the war between Russia and Ukraine. So, and that happened just this past week, during this time. So that is again going back home, all going back home, which means going back to the self in a way and starting to arrange things. And again here, you see that the voices and the things that you read in the paper is about finding diplomatic solutions. Voices in the world, which were on the battling side, now they are more and more about the importance and the necessity of finding diplomatic solutions. So these are few small examples of the global level. There are many things that happen that one can look at. For example, the discovery suddenly of medicine that can fight the bacterial resistance microbes that so far is the most scary thing in terms of infection, because bacteria, if they get resistance, there is nothing to fight them. And we of course promote the strengthening of the immune system and balance and prevention, but I think it's also very interesting that suddenly a new angle, a new method of targeting just the bacteria that are resistant has come along. So I can't go through all of these examples because they will be many, and it is also anecdotal from a scientific perspective. Anecdotal means individual stories that have to be looked at from the perspective of statistics, of comparing before, during, and after, and that's what the scientists will be doing. So this is just a flavor and an idea of what we are doing. And now I pass the discussion to our colleagues, the scientists, who are investigating from different angles and perspectives what we are analyzing and what we hopefully will see when the analysis and the statistics are done. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nader, for explaining such beautifully of why we're doing what we're doing here. And now we would like to play a video recording describing several previous peace-creating assemblies and also explaining how it's possible that our assembly in Hyderabad has already spread a powerful influence of coherence and peace throughout the world. The speaker on this video is Dr. John Hagelin. Dr. Hagelin is in Fairfield, Iowa, USA, and made this recording especially for today's conference. Dr. Hagelin is a world-renowned and widely published Harvard-trained quantum physicist and particle astrophysicist. He is the president of Maharishi International University, Iowa, and also the international president of the Global Union of Scientists for Peace. Dr. Hagelin is one of the foremost researchers on the peace-promoting effects of large groups of transcendental meditating people and its advanced techniques. Dr. Hagelin organized a massive experiment in the US in which about 4,000 meditating experts from across the globe converged in Washington, D.C. in the summer of 1993. In this video, he will be telling us about the extraordinary results of that experiment and of another recent experiment applying the Maharishi effect. He will also briefly explain how this peace-creating technology actually works.
Brain-based approach to peace, or consciousness-based approach to peace, has been endorsed and embraced by the Global Union of Scientists for Peace as the most effective nonviolent means of conflict resolution. According to scholars in the field of conflict, the first stage in the emergence of war is mounting tensions among rival factions in critical hotspots around the world, such as the Middle East. If these tensions continue to mount unchecked, they inevitably erupt as social violence, terrorism, and war. What has been the normal approach of dealing with this issue? Well, we can try to reduce the stress, reduce the tensions. That means eliminating factors like poverty, oppression, injustice, hatred, bigotry. We all know that's not easy. Alternatively, we can reduce the stress. And there are powerful techniques, especially the Transcendental Meditation program, as brought by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, is a very powerful stress buster. TM markedly reduces individual and societal stress. The Pentagon uses Transcendental Meditation. The Veterans Administration in the U.S. uses Transcendental Meditation to reduce the acute stress of post-traumatic stress disorder. And reduction of stress also leads to reduced crime and antisocial behavior. In this regard, TM works. More interesting, group practice of Transcendental Meditation and its advanced techniques, the TM City program, reduces stress on a societal scale. I'm going to show two quick experiments which are quite important in this field. Firstly, in Washington, D.C., the National Demonstration Project took place in 1993, and 4,000 volunteers gathered from across the world and across the U.S. to practice their TM and advanced programs in a group. As that group began to rise in number toward the second half of the month in which the experiment took place, crime dropped markedly. This study was conducted and reviewed by an independent panel of 27 research scientists who collectively agreed with the police department on the data and on the results. The police department was skeptical at first, saying it's going to take 2 feet of snow here in August in order to reduce crime by 25%, which was our expected number, and they were thrilled with the actual results of the experiment, which was highly statistically significant. It's not just crime that changes. The whole atmosphere of the city of Washington changed dramatically. Remember, this is the first term of President Clinton's term in office. He was 6 months into his presidency. The animosity towards him by the Republican-led Senate was so deep that none of President Clinton's cabinet picks, choices, were approved by the Senate. So 6 months into his presidency, there was no government. That changed. In fact, the whole city changed, as described by Sally Quinn, a distinguished columnist in the Washington Post, who said, "What a difference a week makes. The Clinton administration appears to have revived. Washington has relaxed. But such a swift reversal of political fortune is not easy to account for. One can logically wonder whether Clinton really turned things around or if something else is going on." She says, somehow, as if magically from heaven, a calm has descended on this city. And it was striking. The gunshots throughout the night stopped. The sirens roaring up and down the streets went quiet. The whole city relaxed. Second study, very important, was done at Maharishi International University in the United States, which has 2 giant golden meditation domes in which large numbers of people gather on a daily basis to practice TM and its advanced techniques. Those numbers rose suddenly in 2006 due to a grant that supported large numbers to come together, over 2,000. As you can see in this next slide, a sharp increase in the number of people that packed those golden domes. As soon as that happened, crime rates throughout the United States began to fall continuously. The result was highly statistically significant. And suddenly, when that group disbanded, there was a marked increase in crime levels again across the United States. What was quite remarkable about this was when this happened. During this period of decreasing crime, the stock market crash and the Great Recession of 2008 started. Normally, in a period of deep financial recession and hardship and poverty, crime goes up. In this particular case, even though the situation was very difficult financially, crime was still going down. This was considered particularly remarkable. The Washington Post said, "Violent crime has plummeted in major cities across the country, a trend criminologists describe as baffling and unexpected. Experts did not see this coming at all. Criminologists have different theories about why crime is down so much, although most now agree that the long-held belief that crime is driven by the economy is false." Also remarkably, during this period, it was not just the murder rate that went down so substantially. All violent crime went down that substantially. All accidents and tragic deaths went down substantially. The economic misery caused by the recession went down substantially, as you can see in this chart. And more tragically, when that group disbanded, all these negative trends went up again. And this demonstrates the need for a permanent group of these meditating experts. So this brain-based approach to peace is an extensively scientifically validated approach. No other approach to peace has a comparable track record of success. But how does this work from a scientific perspective? Very briefly, our physical universe is structured in layers of creation, from the superficial material world around us to deeper and deeper levels of reality. On the surface of life is what we call classical matter. Beneath the surface level is the world of the atom, which is governed by entirely different laws of nature. More fundamental than the atom is the nucleus and subnuclear particles. At the foundation of the universe is the unified field, a universal field of intelligence at the foundation of all the particles and forces of nature. So physical nature has this structure. Human nature has the same structure, obviously. We have the physical body, we have the mind, we have our fine feeling level. And beneath the finest feeling is being, pure consciousness, the Atma, which is directly experienced and stimulated during transcendental meditation. This unified field of consciousness and this unified field identified by physics are one and the same. And it is at the level of this unified field, the Atma, pure consciousness, that these waves of coherence spread throughout society. Again, theory aside, this is a scientifically, empirically validated approach with no comparable track record anywhere in the field of conflict resolution. I now return the floor to my colleagues.
We would now like to hear from Dr. Frederick Travis. Dr. Travis is director of the Brain Center at Maharishi International University, USA. His work has focused on brain development from birth to adulthood, effects of stress on the brain, effects of meditation on the brain, and subjective and objective markers of higher states of consciousness. Dr. Travis has published 92 papers and co-authored 4 books. He teaches at the undergraduate and graduate levels and regularly presents at scientific conferences globally. He is a leading world authority on the effects on the brain of the Vedic technologies of consciousness. Today, Dr. Travis will demonstrate how transcendental meditation immediately produces coherence and integration in the brain functioning of one person. He will explain the implications of this, not just for personal development, but also for understanding how our group of 11,000 TM meditators in Hyderabad has produced a worldwide influence of coherence and peace. Dr. Travis and his team will then show us how this assembly by meditating together creates even more coherence in the brain of the meditator on the stage. Dr. Travis, I understand that this is the first time this sort of demonstration has been done. Perhaps you'd like to explain what we're about to see.
Thank you very much, Ram. Now, a group of scientists have come together to look at the individual effects of group practice. And we've looked at, first, from the level of DNA. DNA is the first expression of pure consciousness in the physiology. Amrita Srivastava, John Fagan have looked at this. Then myself and Bernard Marcus have looked at the other end, what's happening on the level of brain functioning. Specifically, what is the effect of group practice on brain functioning? So I'd first like to invite Amrita to speak about her research.
Thank you, Dr. Travis. Jai Gurdev, everyone. So it's really an honor for me to present this research amongst such established scientists. And I'm representing Maharishi International University. And what we are looking at is the effect of the assembly and on 3 different types of groups. So we have collected data, and as Dr. Travis was saying, we have collected blood samples to analyze the gene expression. So the RNA level and the DNA level. We're looking at the data before the assembly started, and now we're looking after the assembly is concluding. So we're seeing the effects of the assembly in 3 different types of groups. One is people who have been meditating, practicing Maharishi's Siddhi program for a long time. We call them governors or siddhas. One are the rising siddhas who became yogic flyers during this assembly. So yogic flying again is a very important or a very unique thing that Maharishi has systematized for all of us. It's a really great technology, and it's the highest level of mind-body coordination. So that is one level or one group of people who have become yogic flyers in this group. And then we have our control group who do not practice transcendental meditation. So the people, the volunteers of this Kana Shanti Vanam have been really helpful. All the volunteers, they've been really supportive, and they've been loving to be a part of the study. So the response was very good. These are our 3 groups, and what we are seeing is subjective change in terms of Ayurveda. So we have a Ojas questionnaire, Ama questionnaire. Ojas represents the immunity in the body. Ama represents the not so good features in the body, or you can understand in modern concepts of maybe as development or concentration of toxins in the body. It's possible. So we have a questionnaire at a subjective level. Then when we collect blood samples, when we analyze the gene expressions, we can validate those subjective experiences in a very objective way. So we can actually put Ayurveda also in the limelight through this research. So we are seeing very detailed information before and after the assembly. After, or you can say, well, the assembly is at its peak, or it's during the assembly, to see the effects of the 10,000. As we were saying, as Dr. Nader was explaining, so much good happening around the world with the assembly. So we're seeing it at the individual level also, how much good is happening within us at these small data points that make up this physiology. So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Travis.
Is Dr. John Fagan here? I'll ask Amrita to summarize what John is doing.
I will try my best. So Dr. John Fagan is also doing a really important study where he's looking at the metabolomics, so changes in the blood and different elements of the blood of what's happening at that level, and how. So he's, I think, before the assembly, during the assembly, and after the assembly, and seeing those changes at an individual level, and how collectively this assembly is producing the effects for the individual. So, thank you.
Thank you. So John is looking at minute by minute. He's looking every 10 minutes over the program time of you, the 10,000 people. Amrita is looking over 2 weeks. So we're getting point by point measure of the Maharishi effect and also a broader region. What I've been doing with Bernard Marcus is looking at brain-to-brain synchrony as a possible measure of the group practice of the TM and TM City programs. You probably know the word synchrony or coherence, and usually it's to do with a single individual brain. Brain-to-brain synchrony is looking at the effect of coherence between two people. Same point on the brain of two people. And what is found is when you're engaged in a conversation with someone, brain-to-brain synchrony is higher. When you're teaching a class and the students who get the information you're giving, they have higher coherence with you, the teacher, and that student coherence is higher. It's found in pilots and co-pilots when they're involved in a very complex task. Brain-to-brain synchrony is higher. So we're approaching using 2 studies to see what is the possible effectiveness of brain-to-brain synchrony as a measure of group practice. So my first slide. So this will be the design that we used. So at the top, what we see is your practice, your eyes closed, TM cities, yogic flying. And then what we asked the meditators to do, these are from the Experience the Self course, is come in and do their afternoon rounding. And what we do is we recorded their EEG during their 2 TM practices. So we can forward the slide. And what we see is their first meditation overlapped eyes closed and TM. So we can forward. The second meditation overlapped cities and yogic flying. And what we did is pairs of people were looking at their brain-to-brain synchrony. And notice we can compare these 3 critical aspects of our program: TM, innocent transcending; TM cities, where we're introducing sutras and that silence, which, as Dr. Nader explained, and is increasingly more powerful; and then also yogic flying. So that was the first study. We have the data for that. The second study we're doing is in collaboration with John Fagan. He has non-meditating subjects, and they're resting, they're watching a video, and they're resting. And again, it's overlapping TM in cities and cities in yogic flying. And the question we're asking is a number of questions. Are the meditating group more sensitive to the Maharishi effect than the control group? A second question, as with the meditating group, will increasingly more deeper aspects of the program have a more powerful effect on their brain-to-brain synchrony? So now let's actually look at this in real time. Julianne Girardi has been kind enough to let us see her EEG. What we see here is 19 points on her scalp. The very top tracing is from the front left, and as you go down the tracings, it goes to the back of the brain, it turns around, then it goes to the front of the brain. So you can blink your eyes, Julianne. You notice these big excursions, very top, very bottom. That's coming from her eyes, it's not from her brain. So now we're stopped the tracing, and what we'll see is when the eyes are open, the brain amplitude is low, the frequency is fast. And this is just what the brain does when it's thinking and feeling and so on. Now what we'll do is we'll ask Julianne to begin her TM practice. And what we'll notice is a change in the raw EEG. The signal will get much higher. We'll see it get slower. It's about 8 to 10 cycles per second. And that's the signal of the brain just humming to itself. So you can close your eyes, Julianne, begin your TM practice. Thank you. Just notice a rapid onset in alpha. Thank you, Julianne. You can stop thinking the mantra inside, sit easily and open the eyes. So Gerard, you can move to point with the alpha. I'd like you to look at this record. First, you notice the alpha wave. It really stands out very quickly. Notice it's over the whole brain. This means that the whole brain is oscillating in this frequency. And this is a frequency of just wakefulness. It's a deep silence in our meditation. We're not thinking, we're not doing, we're not evaluating. It's just the experience of pure consciousness. Next, what we'll do is we'll ask Julianne to again close her eyes and meditate. This time we'll be presenting moment by moment coherence. It will be presented as a circle. And the sensors are around the perimeter. And the sensors which are side by side are always quite highly coherent. What you'll notice is when the alpha is over the whole brain, what we just saw, what we'll see is the lines will go from left to right and top to bottom. We'll have her meditate for about 1 or 2 minutes. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to stand up, I'm going to put my hands over my head. I'm going to drop my arms. That's your signal to start TM, okay? And then we're going to see what is the effect of your meditation on her coherence. As has been described, what we experience as our own pure consciousness and deeper investigation is actually a common field. So when you're meditating, you're enlivening that field. And it's being affected by Julianne is just the ability to transcend is more easy, more regular. So we're ready, Julianne? Okay. Close your eyes. And here's the circle. So back to the circle, please. Jay Gurdev. I'll sit easily and then open the eyes. Thank you. So this is a screen capture. It's capturing her coherence. And you notice before you started meditating, there was maybe 1 or 2 times when the whole brain lit up. Good. And now the group practices. As soon as you started, did you notice the whole brain lit up once? Yes, congratulate yourself. Thank you very much. Thank you. So this is our great power. Attending to ourselves, we also affect everyone. We affect the other people in the hall. We affect people who are not in the hall because of acting from that common field of consciousness. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Travis. It's always fun to watch a live EEG demonstration. And we can see the divinity of our technique through this presentation. Before we open the press conference to questions from the journalists with us today, I would like to read a message of congratulations to our Assembly from the former Prime Minister of Japan, the Right Honorable Yukio Hatoyama. Prime Minister Hatoyama writes, and I quote, Honorable Dr. Tony Nader, the leader of the global country of world peace, all the leaders of the world, all participants from the world, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor to address you a congratulatory message at the 10,000 for World Peace Assembly at Kana Shanti Vanam, Hyderabad, India. I have been advocating the theme of fraternity, which means friendship and love among all the nations for peace and prosperity. I am impressed by the achievements of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi to realize global peace through the practice of TM and TM Siddhi programs, which are verified by solid scientific research. Our world needs a group of at least 9,000 people practicing the TM and TM Siddhi programs, the square root of 1% of the world's population. And under the leadership of Dr. Tony Nader, you're already achieving that today. I feel certain that this group, when it is permanently established, will lead to peace in our world today. Based upon my experience as Prime Minister of Japan, I would like to strongly propose that all the governments in the world look into this demonstration with scientific data and support the creation of permanent groups in the world for fraternity, peace, and prosperity. He says in the end, I thank all of you very much for gathering for these 2 weeks for the noble goal that mankind has been pursuing for thousands of years. Congratulations again. Now we'd like to open this conference to questions from all our press team. We unfortunately have time only for a few questions, so if the microphone can be passed on to the journalist, we can take about 1 or 2 questions. I'm sorry. Yes, you can also ask your questions in your regional language, which is Telugu here, and that can be translated by Prashant.
Would it be okay if I ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
Because they're rising in my mind while I was seeing the experiment. I'm Ratna Chotrani with the Siyasat Daily and the PTI. I just wanted to know, why is this experiment not showcased in countries where the conflicts are actually happening, like Palestine, Israel, Russia, Ukraine, Taiwan, etc.? Secondly, is there any research on meditation's clinical utility? And thirdly, is there a consensus among scientists for this experiment, or the effect of this experiment? And one last question. Today there are lakhs and lakhs of peace evangelists around the world, yet the conflicts are rising. Why is that so? Thank you.
I'd like to address the first and last question together, because what we are doing here is not talking about peace or raising awareness about peace on the surface level, like banners and discussion, and everybody should come together and be nice to each other, because such voices are always there and they have been around there from different perspectives. What we need is to create the effect. And the effect is created on the level of natural law itself, on the level of the force, the power that organizes and manages the universe and maintains it in order. And when one goes away from that level, when there is stress in society, people act on the surface level. It's like you have an ocean and you can act on the level of the waves on the surface, and you produce very limited results. If you can be the ocean yourself, then you can move all the outer values. What is beautiful from the Vedic knowledge and tradition, and as we heard from the great quantum mechanical scientists, that the whole universe is based on a field, one field that unifies everything. There are all these layers of expression on the surface, but it's all the expressions on one field. And if you act from that field, then you get the results that you want. So we don't know how many different ways other wonderful people who call for happiness and peace and harmony are acting on which level. What we want is to support them so their thoughts and actions get fulfilled from the level of the ocean itself, not from the level of the waves. And so we are not here to talk, we are here to transcend, which means go beyond all the talking, even the feeling, the thinking, the individuality, go to the universality of the being that acts beyond time and space. And this is what answers the first question. It is not necessary to be in one place as long as you reach a critical number of people. Then your influence is worldwide. And the critical number is the square root of 1% of the population. So if we wanted to do it, for example, between Russia and Ukraine, and they are able to assemble enough people to create the effect locally, we might need lesser number for that particular part of the world, or lesser number for the Middle East. But we felt we have to do something on a global level, since also the protagonists, antagonists are actually on an international level. There are involvement from all kinds of directions in even what looks like limited localized wars. And so the effect has to be global. World population is about 8.1 billion. 1% of that is 81 million, and the square root of 1% of that is 9,000. And that is why we have the 10,000. And when we reach fully the 10,000 and they practice properly the program on a regular basis, all of them together, then you get the effect that is beyond just Hyderabad and Telangana and Bharat, India, and even the Asia. There are many other findings on a personal level, clinical level, 600 research studies, most of them published in peer-reviewed journals that show the effectiveness of this program in reducing stress, improving health, creativity for the students, better behavior, better grades for the students, improvement in IQ, less hospital admissions in all categories of diseases. And, we can mention many. For example, in hypertension, it's very powerful. There is a study that was done with a 5-year follow-up that have shown that people who practice transcendental meditation has 33% less attacks of cardiovascular disease, be it for the heart or even stroke disease, and less deaths. And what is interesting in this study, what I find interesting, people oversee, and this 33% is people who have learned transcendental meditation and who practice it at least once a day. But then they said, the scientists, let's look at those who practice it twice a day. And they found that those who practice it twice a day, they get actually 66% less heart disease, deaths from heart and stroke diseases also.
Dr. Nader?
Would a scientist understand what just happened? And again, this idea of collective neuroscience. Science is beginning to realize we're not fragmented individuals isolated from the environment. We're actually very much intimately connected. So the whole understanding of brain-to-brain synchrony is something that's come up in the last 3 or 4 years because of the improvement in equipment. The big question is how. We were seeing an effect from the underlying field of pure consciousness. There was no behavioral interaction. Everyone's eyes were closed. But we were having that effect. That's something that neuroscience doesn't understand. That's why in our research, remember there was a video between the 2 rest periods. The video will be giving a measure of brain-to-brain synchrony as science knows it. The rest and activity before and after will be looking at a different level, more from the level of the field. So this is the cutting edge of research right now.
Thank you, Dr. Travis. We can take another question.
Good afternoon. My association with this institution is more than 2 decades, and I attended this first peace conference in Iowa when Dr. Nader was, they spoke very well. And his book speaks of very, very important knowledge how we can connect ourselves and with Ramayana. That is what moved me. Secondly, that is how I have been a fan of him, and I think I do remember almost every second day when I face with some problems and solve them. I'm a journalist by profession, but he has given me a lot of answers to my questions, why this peace is not been possible and how it can be possible if TM is practiced all over. I wish yoga has come a wave in the whole world. I want this TM to become a whole world from the school level. So the basic school level, TM is introduced. Perhaps in a decade or so, we will have peace all over. I wish On this note, if someone works on that, I shall be grateful, and I wish I can see such a day that PM is taught at the level of elementary school, so that the whole world will become peaceful place to live in. That is what I am expecting.
This is really wonderful. And actually, you remind me of one of the major results of this assembly, which was our original intent, our original sankalpa, in fact, is that this program becomes permanent. And thanks to this assembly, we have now several offers that are completely serious and solid and are backed up to have this effect permanently created in different places with different 10,000 groups. Namaste, and thank you for being here again.
Time for one more question. More questions? Okay. So now we close the questions with the journalist. Thank you, Dr. Nader, and thank you to all the esteemed scientists who were here with us today demonstrating.
Heaven is descending, descending on the earth. Heaven is descending, descending on the earth. Heaven on earth, heaven on earth, heaven on earth. Heaven is descending, descending on the earth. Light of God is bringing heaven on earth. Guru's grace is bringing heaven on earth. Heaven on earth, heaven on earth, heaven on earth. Light of God is bringing heaven on Heaven is descending, descending on the earth. Heaven is descending, descending on the earth. Heaven on earth, heaven on earth, heaven on earth. Heaven is descending, descending on the earth. Heaven is descending.